Thank you so much, Meg. I'm so excited for this conversation. As Meg said, if you have any questions, you have any comments, make sure to put those into the chat. We love to see them live. Amani, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to dive in here with you.
Thank you so much, Noelle, and thank you, Meg, for such a warm welcome. I'm really excited about it. I love, being in intersectionality spaces and being able to talk about the things that we're really passionate and purposeful about. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Wonderful. Okay, so my first question to you is, how did your background as a Black Muslim woman influence your career goals and decisions? First, taking a look at your background as a sports broadcaster, and then later making the shift into being a travel journalist.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. When I first, went to university, I thought I was going to be an attorney, like my dad. Like I have the gift of gab, and I like to argue a little bit. I like the argumentative, situation, and that kind of thing. And when I got to university, I remember him telling me, major in something that you're good at because you're going to have 4 years of law school. You don't need to major in pre-law, but major in something else that you might have a passion for. Initially, that started off as writing. But ironically, I went to Delaware State University. My uncle had been in sports radio and sports journalism for a very long time. He's covered some of the biggest events in the nation, and he was my sports broadcasting teacher. So when I got to the portion of the class where it was interviewing or whatever the case may be, he was like, you need to find an athlete on campus, somebody who's doing something great, and you're going to interview them, right? Now, me, I'm just like, okay, cool. This is a part of the assignment, et cetera, et cetera. And so I do it. And he was like, you killed it. Like, he was like, you're really, really good at this. Now, me, I'm just thinking, okay. But knowing my uncle, someone who's really perfected his craft a bit, I'm like, I know he wouldn't be putting on airs and telling me this unless he truly believed it. And so that cultivated like that first light bulb in me that, I may be able to do something dynamic as a Black Muslim woman. Like as a Black woman, period, us being in a sports space is still something that people kind of like, like, whoa, like, do they even know the sport? That kind of stuff. And just, being a woman, period, in this particular arena. And so for me as a Black Muslim woman, it was very important to, number one, be Islamically visible, meaning wearing a khimar, wearing a headscarf, being modestly dressed based on my definition of modesty, and really being out there and showing people that, number one, we are dynamic. Number two, we have a multifaceted way of doing things. And it also generate and spark conversations that I'm not afraid of. I'm not afraid to tell people who we are underneath it all, you know what I mean, and who we are culturally versus who we are in the faith. And women are held very highly in the Islamic faith and are some of the most innovative minds throughout Islamic history. So for me, it was just a matter of being in the continuation of a line of some boss women,
And having that visibility is so important. And there's a lot of mindset shifts that really need to happen for anyone who is a part of Islam, and seeing that you're representing that so well is beautiful. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
You know, as someone who seeks to be an ambassador for marginalized people and create conversations that truly shift culture, what are some of the important topics or narratives that you express when you're putting your content together?
Oh, so one of the things is that, so especially as a writer and a journalist at heart, storytelling is at the heart of what it is that I present through my content. So I don't care if it's a nice reel and people see that I'm dressed all nicely. Somewhere in the caption, you're going to get a story. You're going to learn. You're going to get an idea of, who I am, and then ultimately, give you a sense of time and place. So it's important for me to not just have the aesthetically beautiful photos or reels or the things that will get the likes, but to also generate thought-provoking conversation, whether it's in the caption or whether it's in the post in and of itself. And so for me, one of the things that I do with my content creation is I try to educate. I try to educate people on how it is, especially for marginalized folks, how we can be better as people of privilege that get an opportunity to go to different places around the world, whether it's a different state or whether it's a different country, a different nation, wherever. How can we be better? How can we really ingratiate ourselves within other communities? How can we not be come in with the colonizer spirit, as I call it, and make sure that, we understand that when we're traveling to a destination, we're traveling to someone's home. This is not just, going on vacation. And this is something that actually blew up on my TikTok because I was talking recently about Ghana and, people talking about certain cultural norms that on the American side, we don't necessarily experience, but I was trying to inform my audience that when you go to other places around the world, that American privilege, that level of customer service that we anticipate isn't everywhere around the world. And either you get in and fit in, or you go. And a lot of people didn't like that. But for me, it was a matter of having people understand that culturally, yeah, we are connected, but also we as Americans, people that are here, that get educated here, that live here, that grow up here, we do have bits of privilege that sometimes we have to leave at somebody else's doorstep and come with a clear mind and a clear heart and clear intentions.
You talked a little bit there about privilege, and I was thinking a little bit here about passport privilege, and I'm seeing some really good dialogue that's happening in the Black community because we, as we travel outside of the United States, and there may be some people on the call who haven't done that yet, or maybe have, gone to the Caribbean or something where there's more of us there. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how we're the passport privilege versus being seen first with our race, because it does look different from place to place from what I've
it's absolutely a privilege. I tell people all the time, I'm at the intersections of being Black, of being Muslim, and being a woman. As soon as I open my mouth, the game changes. When people hear this clearly spoken English, it's not accented, it's not othered, outside of the fact that I wear a khimar, purposefully because I am a Muslim woman. Sometimes people are like, but where are you from? And as Black folks, we tend to get that. Marginalized folks that, sometimes people aren't sure. Like I could look East African, I could look Sudanese or Somali or Ethiopian to someone, So sometimes I do get, othered in that way, like, but where are you from, but there is that blue passport carries a lot of privilege. And one thing that I always institute is to tell Black folks, number one, that passport is our birthright. Our ancestors fought and died and lived for our right to be able to go where it is that we needed to go. Since we were forcefully brought on the shores, if you come from Black American lineage, if you come from African lineage, we literally have been, since the beginning of time, looking to go other places. We have been sailing the seas for the longest time. The oldest Muslim history is dated back, specifically Black Muslim history is dated back to the 1500s in what we consider the United States of America. And so for me, it's understanding, number one, the roots of who it is that we are. We are travelers. We are people who seek out better and all of those things. However, with that passport, that means that we have a responsibility as people that have a little bit of education, that have a little bit of access to resources, i.e. money and wealth, that we understand that when we go to destinations around the world, that we hold ourselves in a different regard and understand the responsibility that we hold as people with that privilege. Some people don't understand what that particularly means because they're like, no, we're not, we're not white or whatever. But when you have access to be able to go around the world, you can literally pay money, buy a ticket. I just came back from Doha, right? I just came back from Qatar. And so that's a big privilege to be able to go halfway around the world, come back and be here at Power to Fly and speak. You know what I mean? And me understanding that is understanding that also when I am talking about these experiences, when I travel, that number one, yeah, sometimes experiences can be negative, but what I don't want to do is depict a people or a culture or a place with an overall brush. And so it's just a matter of being very intentional with how we speak about people, their food, their culture, their livelihood, and their lives, because it deeply impacts who it is that they are and how people see them. And that is a huge privilege.
Absolutely. I hope anybody who's watching here is absorbing that, because that's definitely something to take home. Thank you. With moving back to the conversations that you're creating and what you're seeing that's really coming down the line, what have you seen has been shifting in some of these conversations, or things that have stayed exactly the same since you've gotten started?
I've seen more conversations that are shifting away from just um I guess posting just to post, that you're in this beautiful tropical exotic destination. Those are buzzwords that are like, please don't say
Mm,
that. Don't call it,
yeah,
don't call a place of people exotic. You know what I mean? It's just different from
absolutely.
yours. Outside I got trees, but they ain't palm trees. You know what I mean? And so it's just a nuance, right? And I think that we're veering away from, I mean, we still have it because social media, right, it has been that place where it celebrates pleasantly aesthetic looking things, whether it's people, places, food, whatever. But I think people are realizing that there's more pertinent conversations that need to be had about places. So, for example, Turkey and Syria, they most recently have just dealt with an earthquake where hundreds of people were killed, right? And so, as opposed to me posting a picture like, hey, I was in Turkey and oh my God, I ate this or I did this or I did that, maybe I'm actually diving into paying my respects to the people who are there and not necessarily focusing on the destination, but focusing on the people, because people are always the heart of the destination. Without the people, most of the time you're not going because it's not developed. There's nothing for you to do. There's nothing for you to really see. But that's
Mhm.
why I think it's more important that we're having conversations about people, about culture, and then also about the actual place, because the people and the culture make the place what it is.
Absolutely. If you're not invested in the culture, the places that you're going, maybe stay home. Like I think that that's
Absolutely.
so important. I absolutely agree. So a question has come in from the audience. How can content creators ensure that their content is inclusive and respectful of different cultures?
Yeah, I think number one, you ask people. When I was having the conversation about Ghana, people were trying to get in depth. And I was like, listen, I'm just a starting place. As someone who has a better idea of the economic crisis that's going on there, I'm just a starting place to get my audience aware that if you're going to Ghana, understand that there's an economic crisis, tip a little more, use local vendors, do the things that are going to positively impact the people on the ground level who typically don't get those tourism dollars that are coming to the big chain hotels. And so I think it's important to, number one, recognize that you can be the starting place for a conversation, but to finish it off, if it's not in your zone of genius, meaning it doesn't fit your intersections, it's not in your culture, it's not, something that you've lived, like, okay, it may not be in your culture, but you're somebody that's like, I've lived in Europe for 50 years. My family has been here for 150 years. Then absolutely, be a part of that conversation. But I say to be respectful of different cultures, include them in the conversation. I think
Mm,
one thing that we've learned, especially post George Floyd era, as it's been called, is that, and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and in that time, is that you can't just negate the people, you know what I mean, who need to be having these conversations. And I think a lot of times we bypass people, when having these conversations and making these posts and doing this content versus saying, hey, Hawaii, the indigenous have been telling us for a couple of years now, please don't travel there. And it's important for us to listen to those folks who are having those conversations. So who are those people? Try to bring those people in. I think that's really important, because not all of us have the range. Like, yes, I travel around the world and I know a little about a lot, but in the full robustness of what's happening on the ground, let me defer that to the people who are there, because their voice actually matters.
mhm. Yeah, so would you say that a part of being inclusive is understanding who are the marginalized people in these different areas that you're writing about?
Yeah, I think first of all is understanding that there are marginalized people in every area of the world, whether
Mhm.
they're LGBTQ plus, whether they are women, whether they are darker colored people, even if they're non-Black, recognizing that there are marginalized people everywhere. There's a top and a bottom economically everywhere. There are people who are impoverished everywhere. There is crime that happens everywhere, right? That is not
Mhm.
off the table. I don't care how luxurious a place looks in the background. There is something that is happening to a people that are considered on the bottom. And it's our ability to recognize that that is a thing, that even when we do travel and we have a good time, that we want to make sure that at some way we can positively affect a change in that specific area of the world. Now, granted, I understand we can't fight the power everywhere that we go, but our voice and our audience, if we have one, can understand and learn more, and they can continue to pass it on, kind of like telephone. You know what I mean? Oh, I learned this from this person on Instagram, or I learned this on TikTok. How many things do we pick up on TikTok that we didn't know like 10,
Oh
15?
my
You're
gosh.
like, wait, I know
Mhm.
that. You know,
Right.
we're learning every single day because now we're so much more connected with the world. So now it gives us an opportunity to take what it is that we learn, to share it with our audiences because maybe they didn't see it. And it gives them the
Mhm.
opportunity to learn and continue to share it with others as well.
Mm, absolutely. Thank you for that. Another question here from the audience. What tools and tactics can be used to ensure that content creation is tailored to reach each different cultural audiences? And I'm also wondering, is that something that we can do, that it can cover everybody?
I don't think you can cover everybody, but I do think that it's possible to reach different demographics. I know specifically on TikTok, whenever I hashtag, and let's say I'm talking about a specific demographic, or I'm talking about a specific destination, I will hashtag that demographic, hashtag Black people, hashtag South Africa, hashtag Poland, or whatever. And those people who typically follow that will actually look at the post. You know, I had a post about Egypt, and it was something that was a little controversial, and people were here and people were there, but the majority of the people that were commenting were Egyptians in Egypt, you know? And so I
Mhm.
think it's a matter of, you know, finding out what the tools are. I think Instagram hashtags now, they're kind of like drowned out because there's so many. So I don't know if there's a way to really get to, you know, certain people that way. But I just think it's a matter of diversifying your content and what it is that you're saying and what it is that you're speaking about, and finding out based on those cultural audiences what matters to them, maybe. And if these are the
Mhm.
things that matter to them, then let me speak on these things. Let me post about these things. Let me show these things. And I think that's the best way to attract whatever cultural audiences that you're looking to attract.
Absolutely. And like you said, whenever you post something on TikTok and there's some comments that are coming in from locals, when you have a really thoughtful approach, I mean, it really means something to people. So I love that that's the way that you approach your work. And another question here is, how can content creators use digital media to spark meaningful conversations on culture?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is something that I do. I am a journalist and a writer first before I even started with the content creation. That kind of like organically happened because, you know, I was living around the world since 2015. I've lived in 5 countries. You know, I gave birth abroad as a, you know, as a Black woman. That's a huge thing because of the
Mhm.
Black maternity mortality rate in the US. I talked about it. I talked about it on my social media, but I also wrote about it. If you have a blog, use it. But if you have the opportunity to, there's a website called Help a Reporter Out. Help a Reporter Out, or we call it HARO, HARO. That is a perfect platform because journalists are always looking for content creators or just voices who are expert in certain things to talk about certain things, to give their expert opinion, to be able to chime in on pertinent conversations. I talk about things all the time. I literally just posted an article that I wrote on Travel Leisure because we're always talking about the past of Black travel. We're not talking about the future. So the article that I wrote, and I incorporated a lot of thought leaders in this, Black thought leaders in the travel space, about the future. What does the future of Black travel look like? What should we be focused on? What should tourism companies be focused on? What should marketing and corporations be focused on? So that's what it is that I'm talking about. So there are many ways that you can use digital media, whether it's your own, by creating a blog about it, writing about it. There's so many different platforms, Substack, Tumblr, WordPress, all of those. Subscriptions, create a newsletter, right? And have your audience getting this pertinent information. You can use Haro, which Noelle thankfully put in the chat, and literally it is free. So you will get daily, like 3 times a day. I'm just letting y'all know they're gonna be flooding your email.
It's a lot of
But
emails.
you know, but if you find something that connects and makes sense, you can get into these publications and be that thought leader in the space to talk about the things that are really meaningful in culture. But there's so many various avenues that you can take. Twitter is another tool that we get to talk our stuff, right? It's changed a bit in this Elon era, but you still get to talk a little bit about your stuff, and people will follow that. People will literally say, wow, okay, these are the conversations that this person's having. I want to tune into whatever it is that they're talking about. So there's various ways in order to do it, but I say write it, speak it, shout it out from the rooftops, however it is that you need to get the conversation out, do it.
That actually brings me to my next question here, because I know that people are watching you. Maybe they've seen you in Essence. Congratulations on that. Maybe they've seen your selfie with Idris Elba and they're like, wait a minute, how can I live your life? Okay. So what advice would you give to others who are interested in a career in travel journalism and digital content creation?
Absolutely. So the travel journalism first, I always tell people to be authentic to you. When I first started in travel journalism, I wasn't sure what my niche bucket was going to be. So I started writing for a study abroad program. That's where I got my first chops, I guess, in the travel journalism industry. And then I was like, I really want to talk about what I'm experiencing, what I'm living. And the first article I wrote was how I traveled my entire pregnancy. I traveled the entire thing. I did a 6-city tour in China. I did a month in Thailand. I came back to the States for maybe 2 weeks, and then I gave birth to my son in Poland. And talking about that experience as a Black woman, as a Black Muslim woman, as a Black person giving birth to a baby in Poland, like people were like, whoa, it was fascinating. And so for me, as a travel journalist, find that niche bucket that you feel like, even if it's luxury, if you're a luxury girl and you like, I want to get into all the St. Regis hotel openings, I know a Black woman in that space who does that. So if that's where it is that you want to be, or you really want to talk about cultural things that matter, like food, you know what I mean? There is literally a place for you. You just have to find out the stories that are important to you, the stories that you really want to tell. But I will tell you, the travel space is much more open to having our stories being told. You just have to know how to tell it. You know what I'm saying? And then when it comes to the content creation, for me, at first, I was thinking, the aesthetically nice photos or whatever, but I've always, you can scroll to the beginning of time of my Instagram. I've always had some kind of caption that was giving you some kind of information. I lived in Wuhan, China, right? So people before the pandemic didn't know where that was pointed out on the map. So when I would tell people, oh, I live in Wuhan, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, cool. Then when COVID hit, it was like, you live in Wuhan, that kind of thing. So it was my responsibility then that whatever I posted to show this beautiful, Wuhan is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to. And so to show people, I lived on the 26th floor of a high-rise building, marble floors. It was stunning. It's a very family-friendly community. It has tons of universities and mega malls. And that's the way I use my content creation, because especially during the hashtag Stop Asian Hate, I was like, these are my brothers and my sisters. This is my community as well, because these are people that welcome me into their home. They welcome my baby into their home. And so therefore, I'm not going to stand for anybody, separating this group of people who are going through probably one of the most tumultuous periods in their lives as well. And so that's how I use my platform. I find a way to educate, you know what I mean? And I find a way to also show and depict a place in a way that most people have never seen and never heard of as a Black Muslim person.
Absolutely. That responsibility is so important. Final question here. And I know that you have incredible stories I've been watching you for a minute here. But what would you say are some of the most, or let's say maybe one of the most impactful experiences that you've had as a world traveler and global citizen?
Oh, I've had a lot, but the first thing that came to mind, so I gave birth to my son. My son was born in Szczecin, Poland, which is in the northwest region of Poland, much closer to Germany than it is in anywhere else in Poland. And he was born at home. And 2 days after, we found out that a priest wanted to come visit our home. Okay. And we were like, okay, we lived in a very small, like studio apartment. And he waited downstairs because he knew that I was a Muslim woman. And he said, I want to wait until the mother is okay with me coming upstairs. I want to make sure that she's covered, etc. He comes upstairs, once I, get my hijab on and everything. And literally, he bought so much clothes, diapers, wipes, toys, shoes. I mean, bags and boxes full of things. We could have been in Szczecin for 2 years and would have
Wow.
had plenty for our son. And the interesting thing is, before we got there, people were like, oh, they don't like Muslims. I don't know if they like
Mhm.
Black people. I may have seen like 4 Black people the whole time we were in Szczecin, and they might have been international students. And I remember that experience of feeling like family, and people taking care of us, taking care of me as a new mother, taking care of my son as a new person just entering in the world. And that is something I share with people all the time, because I'm like, as soon as people start with the, oh, they don't like Black folks, or they don't like, I'm like, you never know what your specific presence is going to do in a destination, or how it is that people's minds are going to change, or how people are going to feel once you've been there and they've engaged with you and you leave. You never know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Imani. And I'm taking that with me. I'm taking this whole conversation with me. I hope that everyone was able to gain something from this important conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you all so much for having me. Those of you who are out there that are aspiring, you're inspiring. So keep doing what it is that you're doing. Continue to be authentically yourself, because that matters and someone is paying attention.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't add anything better to that, so I'm not even going to try. Thank you, Imani and Noelle, for allowing us to kind of sit in on that amazing conversation. We're going into a recording now, so I'll step back and let y'all hear from Latasha Williams. But we'll be back here with our next set of programming at 11 a.m. Thanks, y'all.